Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show. Home improvement repair and maintenance tips from the pros. The Handyman Pros Radio Show? Who the heck are these guys? Thanks for listening to the Handyman Pros Radio Show. My name's Larry. I'm here with my buddy John. John, how you doing today?
I am doing very well, Larry.
Are you sure?
I think so. I'm vertical.
We're above ground.
Yes.
It's good. Awesome. We love it. So, John, the topic of this show is who are these guys? And so this is actually our first episode. So what we thought we would do is we would interview each other and describe what our qualifications are and what we've done that actually allow us to come forth and bring you this radio podcast. Yeah, I guess we'll call it a radio show. But some of the things that we've done and why do we get the unique privilege of coming to you and bringing this topic to you. So I wanted to ask you a question. John, what do you actually do right now for a living? What's your job?
Yeah, so right now, Larry, I'm glad you asked that question. I am a handyman, and that's what I've been doing for the last year. And have had a lot of fun doing it, helped a lot of people doing it, and that's why I want to come on this show and let's talk about that.
Well, that sounds good to me. So I, too, am a handyman. We work full-time. John and I actually work together. We work in the north suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, and we work in the North Georgia area as a general rule. We see lots of different things, and so one of the things that we were wanting to discuss with you is just some of our qualifications and some of the places that we've gone and some of the things that we've done. So, John, you grew up where? Didn't you grow up?
I grew up outside of Chicago, and I grew up in a pretty older home. Yep. It was built in the 50s, and as I grew up, I was always fixing things.
Yeah, I'll bet your dad made you do that stuff.
And my dad made me do that stuff. We never really had anybody. I actually can't remember any time we actually had somebody come out and fix anything, except maybe a guy that had to drill a well at our house. Of course,
you had a well at your house?
We had a well at the house.
Was it? Wait, isn't your house like in the city of Chicago?
It was in the suburbs.
It was in the burbs?
And we had a septic tank.
Oh, really? So you had septic and a well. Yeah. So I grew up in Western New York, outside of Rochester, New York, in a southern suburb there, down by the New York State Thruway, for those of you from that part of the world. Little town called Victor, New York, and we too actually had a well. We had a well and, of course, had a septic system. Grew up on a 60-acre farm. And one thing we share in common is that my dad, as well, also never had anybody come to the house to fix anything. He told my brother and I, I'm at work, you're fixing things. And so we both, my brother and I say, we both had to learn how to do things, and it was questions like, well, gee, Dad, how do we do this? He goes, I don't know, figure it out,
Right.
And a lot of the things in those days were pre-internet, so today you just go to YouTube and type in whatever you're trying to repair. But in those days, you actually had to learn things, and you had to teach them. Is that kind of the same thing you had? Is that the same?
That's right. And when my dad went to work, it was if I had to get up in the attic, just don't fall through the ceiling. So you learn a lot when you're a young man, and you're being taught that you're going to know how to do these kind of things.
Yeah, and it was really expected in those days, I guess. It's a little different today where they didn't have, well, I mean, I know in my case, we grew up, it was pretty rural. Our closest neighbor was a good quarter of a mile from the house. And so we did not have a huge support system. And where we lived at the time I grew up there, it was really the country. It's since changed. It's become kind of the suburbs. But at the time I grew up there, it was considered a very, very rural area. Did you have a similar experience, or were you more in the suburbs?
Well, we were in the suburbs, but it was very rural from that perspective. Not as rural as that. We had next door neighbors, although we lived on, I believe it was 3/4 of an acre and those kind of things. But it was, a little closer than that. So I got to know my neighbors. I got to work on their homes.
Yep.
And those and one thing led to another. And it just wasn't homes that we worked on. It was cars. It was lawnmowers. My dad always
boats,
fixing boats,
bikes, you name it.
Everything. We built our own motorbikes and all those kind of things. So it was, I'm sure there's people in the audience that have a lot of similar experiences.
And I'm sure there's a lot that don't.
And there's a lot that don't. But coming up in those years, everybody was expected to, pull their own weight and do their own repairs and learn those things.
And things have changed a lot since then. I know in our area you just didn't have the number of providers that you have today. So you did not have the number of repair people. You did not have those kinds of things, and that's where it really was a self-reliant type situation. I grew up in it was a rural. I never did describe the house I grew up in was actually built in 1812. The original part of the house was built in 1812, and then there were 3 additions that have been put on the house since then. One was built probably in the 1920s, I'd say 20s to 30s, just looking at the way it was built, and then the 3rd edition was the edition that my father did. That was in the late 50s and into the early 60s. So that's the house that I grew up in from that standpoint, and it's really was a walk through time. It was really interesting to see different construction methods and things like that on that particular house, because the original house had no nails in it. It was all pegged together, and
wow.
we'll have conversation on what that means later. But the first 2 sections of the house had lath and plaster, wood lath and plaster.
That's the way ours was, too.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I know a house built in the 50s was probably maybe made of drywall, maybe, but probably not.
Ours wasn't.
And and I mean, I've seen that in other places where out into the 50s and 60s they still were making lath and plaster. And we'll describe what that is in a future show at some time. But that's just a part of the place. And I too shared those same things. We worked on everything. We worked on our own cars. And I say we, it's my brother, myself, my dad. We worked on our own cars. We worked on the lawnmowers. We cut the grass. We did the fences. We did. You name it, we did it. We did the rod. We pumped the septic tank once, which was not a lot of fun, but
no, it doesn't sound like that would be too much fun.
It was
so yeah.
We'll let that one go. But that's some of the experiences that we've had, and since then, John, what have you been? Where else have you lived, and what were some of the other things that you've done in your job as a profession, as a career?
So I really got into, from that start of learning how to do all these things and working on the lawnmowers and the cars, what we just talked about. My neighbor was a master mechanic. I apprenticed under him for most of my high school years, and I rebuilt cars, did body off restores on cars, and moved on to aviation.
Really?
And that's where you and I had met. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I went to flight school, learned to fly before I even had my driver's license. After I got out of high school, I went to college and studied aviation mechanics. I came out of that with a Bachelor of Science degree plus my airframe and power plant license, and went to work for one of the major airlines for about 10 years.
And where was that?
That was in Miami.
Miami.
That was in Miami. So I got to experience all of that, all those building techniques down there as well. But
a lot of concrete.
A lot of concrete.
It
was a lot of heavy duty wind resistant thing.
Yeah,
for all the reasons.
And hot weather. So
in hot weather.
Yeah, and so I too. So coming out of college, I went to college in Central New York. I lived there in beautiful outside of Utica, New York, for a number of 3 or 4 years, and then moved to Southern New Hampshire. Lived and worked. I actually lived in Southern New Hampshire. Worked in Boston. Got to live on the coast and got to see again. In my case, I got to see a lot of the truly older homes, again, homes that were, or construction techniques that were old, much like the house I grew up in, but houses built anywhere from, I don't know, the 1700s that were left up into current technologies, if you want to call it that. I worked in the vending industry at that time, came out of work, went to work in the vending industry, which is a part of my career further on in life, and just stayed there for about 10 years and moved back to Rochester, where I actually got into the truck maintenance, mobile truck maintenance business, which is a whole nother long story. But I've been a maintenance guy for most of my life. I really enjoy the maintenance side of things, and I see the financial benefit to proper maintenance of whatever it is that you own. It doesn't matter if it's got moving parts; it needs maintenance.
Exactly, and that's one of the values that we want to bring to in this show to our listeners, is being able to really recapture some of that money and save a lot of money doing these type of repairs yourself.
Money and time, right?
Right.
And hassle, if we want to call it that, because you know this and I know this, but maintenance is one of those oftentimes overlooked things that people say, I just don't need to do it right now. And while that's true, correct, I guess I'm going to ask you a question. So if you were working on that airplane, and the guy said, well, you know, that flap, that bolt that holds the flap on there, the flap's a part of the wing that makes the plane land properly. So that people out there in the audience know. But you know, that bolt's starting to show like, John, it doesn't need maintenance. Just wait, right? Why don't you just wait on that? What?
Yeah, that doesn't. That's not going to fly. No pun intended.
No pun intended. Exactly.
But
that actually has
these type of things, and you're absolutely right. They have to be looked after, and preventative maintenance, and necessary maintenance. It has to be done.
Does it save you a lot of money in the long run?
A lot of money
in the long run, yeah,
and lives.
And well, in the case of aviation, it's lives, right?
And your house.
Your house.
If you're not keeping up with your house, and especially with your HVAC system, or because of the carbon monoxide it can push out, or bad faulty wiring that we run it. Very dangerous stuff. But if you keep your eye on it and you keep up with it, you're fine.
Yeah, you're fine. And even other things such as making sure the water flows away from your house, and making sure water isn't coming into your house. And water is very damaging. And a lot of people just kind of overlook it. That's been our experience, because we go out on these jobs every week, right? And we see lots of things where we're like, wow, if you had caught this 10 years ago and stopped this problem 10 years ago, you wouldn't have this major expense today.
Right.
And we'll do a plethora of shows on all kinds of topics, from wood rot to gutters to, you name it, roofing and things like that we've seen out there in the field. But yeah, these are all part of maintenance items. And I think, at least it's been my experience as a professional handyman, that I see really a huge lack of basic maintenance in most people's homes.
Right.
That
you're right. That is very true. And that's one of the things that as we roll out some of these podcasts for the audience, that we'll have different segments that we'll talk about to help them keep up and remind them what they need to be looking for.
Right. And we will share a lot of our information that we live. So John had alluded to it, but both of us, I have a private pilot's license as well. One thing that we've learned from the aviation industry is the power of the checklist. Do you agree with that, John?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And to give you an idea of what a checklist is, that pilot doesn't go out there and just jump in the cockpit of the plane, unlike your car, right? And I learned this. I worked for a long time in the medium and heavy duty trucking industry, and it's the same thing. Technically, by DOT law, I was going to say Georgia DOT law, but it's actually nationwide. A truck driver is supposed to go out and do a walk around his truck, and every pilot does that, right? So that pilot doesn't go out there and jump in that airplane seat and just say, "Hey, fire up, let's rock and roll, baby," like away we go. Right. He goes through an exhaustive checklist of, I can't remember about how many items is it. You probably know better than I do, but it's several hundred.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Especially in commercial, they're all doing that all the time. And
right.
I know a lot of us, when we fly, we take it all for granted, but those, you can't.
Right. Because one mistake.
Right. Well, and it goes for your home too.
Correct.
I mean, not to that extent, perhaps, but it keeps you out of a lot of financial issues.
It does. And those are the things. So we'll coming up, we'll have some free resources that y'all will be able to draw on, that we'll send you checklists and things that we're using for our homes, and for what we do when we actually go into a property and what we're actually looking for. And these are all things that are born out of our we'll call it our life experiences, right? So we both have this aviation thing, and I know I'm heavy into checklists. do it even on my car. I walk up, I do a mental checklist before I even crank the engine, just learned over the years to do that. What else have you worked in, John? What other industries have you worked in?
Well, what I actually retired out of, I alluded to I was working for the airlines for 10 years. After that, I was in the software business for 33 years, selling enterprise resource planning, manufacturing software, and supply chain software. So that was a lot of fun. You learned
a lot. Your season of life has changed, hasn't it?
And it has changed since I retired. And but you learned a lot about business, and it's been it was enjoyable for the most part. But now it's time to get back to things, working with my hands again and things like that.
Yeah. So it's a similar story for me. So I left the vending industry and actually went into doing some entrepreneurial ventures and things like that. Really learned business very strong. Went into doing a lot of straight commission sales. I sold a lot of equipment, mostly medium and heavy duty trucks again. So that's Class 6 to Class 8, which is 26,000. It's bigger trucks. We didn't sell pickup trucks. Very, very rarely. Sold a lot of equipment on the back of those trucks. So I was what they call a vocational truck salesperson. I sold trucks that did jobs. So I sold dump trucks and septic tank pump trucks and aircraft fueling trucks and all kinds of things that basically, if you think about when you see a truck driving down the road that's got a piece of equipment on the back, that's what I was doing. Sold trucks to municipalities and things like that. And then I also ran as a side hustle. I ran a vending company myself that I started many years after I'd gotten out of the vending business, and ran a vending business for probably 12 or 13 years. And vending is a lot of maintenance. It's a lot of, certainly learned a lot about business again. Each individual little store learned a lot about marketing and merchandising, had to maintain my truck fleet, which I actually had plenty of experience in doing. So,
and that's a big job. I mean, how many machines did you have?
I had 350 machines out at the peak. We had about 110 accounts, and it was a full-time job. I had 3 or 4 employees that worked for me. It was good. It was just again, it kind of came back to, I got out of it because it kind of came to a season in my life where it was just time to change. So I left and then went back. Let's see what I do after that. Oh, then I actually went and worked for a gun club. I was as I say, I had the single serve vending machines, which were clay target machines. So we kept the gun club going. We had to do a lot of refurbishment and a lot of rebuild and do a lot of things that when we took the facility over, it was in pretty rough shape. We worked on the shotgun side, so it was all clay targets and things like that. But we had a lot of machines we had to maintain. We had a facility we had to maintain. We had about 350 acres we had to maintain, which was another. I guess it was a lot of experience I'd had as a kid growing up on a farm. We knew how to take care of property, if you want to call it that. Property meaning open land and things like that, and things you have to look out for. And it's not that it's difficult. It just sort of has its own unique set of skills to do that. And then we moved out to Dallas, Texas for a little bit, and I got back into the truck business, and then ended up moving back to Atlanta, and so here I am in the handyman business.
Yeah, and I think through all these stories that we're telling the audience right now, is that a lot of the things that we've learned through all that experience. And I think, one of the things that we do bring, that we will share with the audience through this thing and share with our customers and try to work with them the best things that we can do for them. We help them do problem solving.
Yeah, it really is. It's critical because sometimes and you know this, John, but our audience needs to know this. Sometimes the symptoms are not the cause, right? So you go in and, for example, you find wood rot. Well, we know, and we'll do a whole show on wood rot coming up in the future, but we know that wood rot's caused by a moisture problem. It's caused by water. And the question is finding out where that water's coming from. And that
can be a real
challenge.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's And so we will talk about things like that, about what I call it root cause, right? So what's the root cause? And there are root causes for things that sometimes they're unrelated. Mm-hmm. They're completely unrelated. And I know that I draw a lot of that experience comes from me, from the vending industry, because, man, the unrelated problems, you would have a symptom coming out of the vending machine where it would take money, or it would steal your money. Well, it's called take money. It would steal your money. And you'd be like, why did it do that? Well, and you come to find out it's something totally unrelated to your vending machine, completely unrelated to the vending machine. And as a result of that, you're like, oh man, like it's kind of a drag. But in aviation, I'm sure you had the same thing. That sometimes something happens at the far end of the piece of equipment that causes a problem at the front, and you have to figure it out because you can't.
That's correct.
You've got to get it. You've got to get them in sync. And so we find. I find that a lot in a home, and in when I'm out doing handyman jobs, I find that something's exhibiting a symptom, and it comes from something totally unrelated.
Right. It's really is surprising. Which as the show grows, all those things will unfold, no doubt.
Yeah, it brings a huge amount of topics, but I call that the root cause solutioner. And as you said, I consider myself. What do I really do? I solve problems.
Yeah.
And even my business card, it says solution specialist. And so, but the problems aren't always what they seem to be.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Once again, so we're sitting here going back and forth about our backgrounds and talking about this. I think one of the things is that we bring a lot of business experience to these conversations, and that's going to translate into value for the listeners, because we're going to look at it through your eyes as well. Of why should I be doing these repairs? What's the benefit of doing these repairs?
Should I do these repairs?
Should I be doing these repairs? I mean, should I be doing anything like this? Depending upon what the situation is. Am I buying a home? Am I selling a home?
Right.
Am I doing all those kind of things? So there's a lot of value that we're going to be sharing with you, as well as doing some of those that problem solving and answering a lot of the questions that'll be coming up here.
Yeah, it brings up another point. You just brought up a great point from me. It's one of the things on my resume that I did not describe yet. But in the mid-'90s, I started buying rental properties. And actually, a lot of my handyman... The reason I'm in the handyman business right now is because I was doing most of the work on those rental properties. And when you look at a rental property, there's things that you do and there's things that you don't do. But that's that business side of it. It also is playing into that real estate side. And so we bring value to you, our listeners, with thoughts sometimes and questions, and we do envision us having a live email sessions where people will send us emails and we'll answer questions for them. And so that'll be coming up. It actually will be questions at handymanprosradioshow.com. So it will be questions at handymanprosradioshow.com. You can send us your questions, and we will answer questions on the air, live, or not live, but we'll answer the questions for you on the podcast and give you pretty comprehensive things, and or send you resources to help you get those problems fixed. And we feel that interaction with you, our listeners, is going to be absolutely critical to making this show a success. Plus, you're going to give us great ideas to do future shows. So.
And the other thing is, I'd just like to add that, listen, we don't know everything. We're going to have guests on to talk about specific things that are they're either master electricians and plumbers and HVAC folks, inspectors. You can't know everything, but when you send us those questions, we're going to certainly research it, and we'll have the shows. We'll actually bring people on that can answer those questions. If they're deep that we can't answer. We want to learn along with you.
We're going to be learning right there along with you. So some of the things, so it brings up a different conversation or topic of conversation, but in your handyman business, John, are there jobs that you don't do?
There are jobs that I don't do.
Right. And same thing for me.
Yeah. There are jobs that I won't do, especially at this age. I'm not gonna. I don't really go above 2 stories on a ladder, and I'm not climbing up on roofs.
Right.
Things like that. If I get a job that's a very comprehensive job, that's beyond working with you on some of these jobs. If it's a big remodel, that's not what we do. That's not what we do. We're not general contractors.
Right.
And we're gonna address working with general contractors because we've done it a number of times.
They don't call them tractors for nothing, right?
We're gonna help you understand how to work with them, how to make the best of that relationship, because a lot of people don't. But I'll leave that for another show.
Right.
And so there are jobs that I won't do.
Right. And for example, I know one of the things that I don't do is I don't really do HVAC work or heating, ventilating, and air conditioning work. I don't do it largely because I don't have the tools. Mostly, there's some specialized tools that those guys have and need,
Right.
And they do things that I just don't have, and they have a level of expertise that's higher than. I mean, I can do it. It's not a question that I can't do it, but I'm not as efficient as they are, and I can't do some of the things that they want to do. I mean, if we're talking about changing air filters, it's one thing, but we get into recharging an air conditioning system.
I'd rather leave a lot of things like that to the proper
real
professionals that do this day in and day out.
Yeah.
And they appreciate that. So we have good relationships with those folks. And I will say that the other thing that we are technology guys too. So we'll bring, we're going to be bringing some information on smart homes. All kinds of ways that you can use technology in your home to make life a lot easier, especially in repairs.
Yeah. And then also one other thing that we'll bring, and again, these are somewhat, we'll call them value statements. These are things we hope to bring to you that are worthwhile, but things we talked about checklists a little bit, but we're big, both of us are financial guys. We're business guys, and we're going to bring you some spreadsheets on actually tracking your availability or what your costs are on your home, because a home always costs you more to live in than you think, and some of the things you don't pay attention to, but those will be free resources that we'll put out there as well. So there's a lot of things going on, and this is basically who we are and what we're going to bring you. And with that, John, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's I'd like to say to the listener that appreciate you folks listening to us. That's a little bit about our background. And hopefully that kind of sets the stage for our upcoming shows.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds like a wrap.
All right. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this podcast and have derived some value from it, here's 4 things you can do. 1, tell your friends about this podcast. 2, hit subscribe on your podcast player. While you're there, leave a review. Feedback is so helpful. 3, subscribe to our newsletter by going to handymanprosradioshow.com and click on the subscribe button. We'll inform you of upcoming events, shows, and give you actionable tips for maintaining your home and property. 4, send us an email with your questions to questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.